as we move to this next session, where the topic is capacity building and industrial collaborations within the country. And herein our panelists are going to be discussing on the innovation, capacity building, technology transfer and industrial collaboration in building the strong ecosystem and growth roadmap for the industry. So I invite and introduce our session chair, Shri D. Radhakrishnan, and aerospace engineer by background. He is the chairman and managing director of NSIL, New Space India Limited, which is the commercial arm of ISRO, and its main objective is to scale up industry participation in the Indian space programs. Our moderator for the session, Dr. V.S. Hegde, former scientific secretary ISRO and the former CMD of Antrix. He spearheads the space commerce activities of the Indian space program that encompass leasing of communication transponders, providing launch services for the foreign satellites, marketing Indian remote sensing satellite data, and so on. So welcoming both of them, and let me also quickly introduce and welcome our speaker as a panelist, Mr. Tony Azzarelli, the CEO of Access Space Alliance UK, Mr. Apparao V. Mallavarapu, the chairman and managing director of Centum Electronics Limited, Mr. Patrice Kuras, the Industrial Cooperation and Partnerships Operations Thales Alenia Space Scans France, and Mr. Gurvinder, Chohan, the CEO and founder of AQST Inc. Canada. So welcome to all the panelists and the chair and moderator on board, and with that I hand over to our session chair for the opening remarks, and then we take the proceedings of the session. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you very much for the introduction. I hope I'm audible.
You're audible, sir.
Okay, thank you much. Now, first of all, I would like to thank SATCOM Industry Association, the SIA, for organizing this India Space Conference on SATCOM emerging trends post-reform era. I would say this is it's a great achievement amid difficult times of this COVID. Now, if you look at the theme of this session today, it is titled Capacity Building and Industrial Collaboration within the country. I think to speak on this particular topic, we have four eminent speakers in this panel who I am sure would bring their perspectives on how the private players could play a very bigger role in the opening up of the space sector in the country. Before we begin the panel discussion and hand it over to the moderator, would very quickly like to make some few introductory remarks. I represent New Space India Limited, NSIL, which got incorporated during March 2019 as a Central Public Sector Enterprise, CPSC, a Schedule A company under Department of Space, DOS. And coincidentally, it had the vision in line with the theme of this session, which is capacity building and taking industry to a better heights through industrial collaborations. In fact, if you look at the NSIL's vision, it was basically to enable, when it was created, it was basically to enable Indian industries to scale up high technology manufacturing and production activities within the country so that they can meet the space program needs within and thereby boost the Indian space economy. Now, as you are all aware, during last year in June 2020, Government of India had taken a very significant initiative of unlocking the space sector to enable larger participation of Indian companies and startups in the area of space. And not only that, it has also enabled the provisions for effective utilization of space infrastructure available within the country. I'm sure everybody will appreciate when we talk about the space infrastructure, it has a long gestation time and a lot of revenue investment is required. So we feel this particular initiative is of utmost importance when we look in the context of the private companies have to leapfrog and undertake this very daunting and challenging task of building launch vehicles and satellites within the country. I think this is one of the very good hand-holding approach that the government has taken up. I would also like to say, as part of Space Reform Initiative, our mandate, NSIL's mandate, also got significantly enhanced, not only related to enabling Indian industries to participate more into the space program, but we have been now tasked with the responsibility of undertaking space-based missions on a new approach, which we define it as a demand-driven model. As you may be aware, all along we have been doing the missions on a supply-driven model, which basically existed for quite a long time. When I say demand-driven model, it basically means that the user is identified, you build, launch something for them, and then provide the services. What this would ensure, this particular new approach of demand-driven model, would ensure a very effective utilization of the space assets and resources, and eventually in turn will enrich the space economy. So as part of this approach, I think we would be aggregating the user requirements. So we'll be basically, NSIL will be responsible for building the satellites, launching, owning and operating the communication satellite. We are concentrating today right now on the communication satellite, and provide services to the end customer, which eventually mean NSIL is going to emerge as a satellite operator in India. Now, when we are talking in the backdrop of the industrialization in the space arena in the country, NSIL is specifically looking at undertaking the operational missions of ISRO. So if you look at the space activity that happens in India, it's mainly the Indian Space Research Organization who do it. So we are going to take up the operational missions of ISRO. So when we say the operational missions of ISRO, it would involve building the operational launch vehicles of ISRO. The only route that's available is through the Indian industries. And in fact, we have already taken an initiative towards this activity, where we have started the initiative of building our workhorse launch vehicle, the Polar Satellite launch vehicle, through the Indian industry option. Things are going well. And the other activity, once the launch vehicle activity is done, we will go ahead with making more and more optional newer launch vehicles to the Indian industry. So that is one way we are looking at how we basically build the capacity within the country and enrich the industry partners to take up more space-related activities. In addition, we are also looking at building satellites for users, either through ISRO or through private entities. I think when it comes to building satellites, the bigger satellites, I think we have a long way to go before we have the Indian companies on board to really build and realize a satellite for that. So this is one of the initiatives we are also trying to look at how basically we can progress in this, but we definitely have a mandate and vision to take up this activity of building satellites even through the Indian industries. I would also like to say, in addition to this, one very important activity which will really enrich the industrialization in the Indian space sector is the responsibility of NSIL to transfer the technologies. We are the now prime responsible for transferring the technologies which are developed by ISRO and DOS, Department of Space units, to Indian industries. I feel this is quite an important task, and it is going to pave the way for enriching the space ecosystem within the country. So once we have the really complex technologies developed, and if it is made available to the industries, I think it will come in a big way and enrich the ecosystem within the country. So I would feel this particular move of liberalizing the space sector in the country through space reform is going to enrich and enable Indian industries to take up this high technology space related activities and enhance the space revenue within the country. So I think with this brief introductory remarks, I would request Dr. Hegde, the moderator for this session, to briefly introduce the speakers and conduct the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Dr. Hegde, please.
Hope I am audible.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Radhakrishnan. It is indeed a pleasure to be a part of this panel with Mr. Radhakrishnan, who has been my very dear colleague for many years. And this session, as it is already written, it is supposed to discuss on capacity building and industry collaboration within the country. And the panel will discuss on innovation, capacity building, technology transfer, and industry collaboration. Also in the light of the reforms announced by India's government for the space sector in May 2020, which Mr. Radhakrishnan already elaborated. So we have four distinguished panelists. Mr. Tony Azzarelli, CEO of Access Space Alliance in UK, Mr. Apparao Mallavarapu, CMD of Centum Electronics India. We have Mr. Gurvinder Chohan, founder and CEO of AQST, who was previously with MDA Canada, and Mr. Patrice Kuras, Industry Cooperation and Partnership Operations Executive from Thales Alenia Space. So I hope there are no revised guidelines from the organizers. We will have 1 hour. So maybe Rajiv, if you have any suggestion. Otherwise, we take it as we have 1 hour total. So we solicit each of our distinguished panelists to give their thoughts, taking about, say, 5 minutes each on how can we build a strong ecosystem and growth roadmap for our industry, supporting India's space program, making India's private sector a true co-traveler in all round space sector activities in the country. And eventually, we want Indian private space sector to contribute to the space sector activities worldwide as well. So I think with this few words from me, we can go to panelists one by one. So to begin with, I request Mr. Tony Azzarelli, CEO of Access Space Alliance UK, to make his, say, 5 to 6 minutes observation.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are able to hear you very well.
So thank you to all the distinguished delegates, and thank you to the organizers for this conference, and congratulations to the SIA for creating this association and also giving us this conference as a matter of business, basically. So I represent the Access Space Alliance, which is a international organization, a non-for-profit organization, basically. We started off in 2019, and our aim was basically to promote the smaller players in the satellite business, basically, which have been starting to come out, basically, and make business not just in Europe, but basically on a global basis. In fact, we have about 30% of our members even from Asia and the Americas and Africa, as well as the European and the North Americans, basically. What has been very interesting is that these players being startups and being new into the field often find it difficult to approach and to understand what is their business and how they move within the business itself. So they do actually require a lot of help and a lot of hand-by-hand approach to make sure that they actually follow the proper steps to become a business, in effect. So in that sense, as I have seen mainly as a spectator for the last 20 years working in the UK, how governments actually approach the issue of capacity building and helping the industry and collaborate with the industry. I would say that in all effect, there is a sort of a cycle here whereby the country would have to create a strategic approach to capacity building and goals to where the country would like to be taken over the future, basically, and that requires some very strong collaboration with the industry through consultations, through panels between the industry and the government, basically, in finding and putting together a strategic document which will help both the industry and also the country itself. And so this is basically a needed approach, because then the country would have to invest basically and intervene in particular places whereby technology, innovation, and research would have to be sort of put together to achieve those strategic goals that the country itself is trying to achieve basically over the years. And very importantly, financing also this sort of capacity building is quite important, and I have seen over the years within the UK itself, which basically was not a big faring country within the European Space Agency, but then lately, over the last 10 years, they've built a very large and very successful push to spearhead the UK internationally in space, basically. And they did that judiciously by investing quite a lot of efforts in coming up with a strategic approach to space, and also investing quite a lot of money, in fact, to help the industry and also externalize and internalize itself as well at the same time. Liberalization is quite important because it helps competition. It reduces bureaucracy, basically. It creates also the creation of independent regulators is quite important as well, because of the fact that there's a lot of interactions, not only nationally, but also internationally, whereby companies within a particular country would also have to externalize their business, become international, and that liberalization will work, will help actually to achieve that. In fact, within the liberalization, foreign direct investment actually is quite important as well, because you get foreign companies to invest nationally, and that also requires a different approach in ownership, company ownerships within the country. Removing regulatory barriers is quite important. Creating tax-free technology hubs where you can attract foreign companies to bring the technology, their IP, internally in your country, basically, and at the same time benefit from tax-free investment for which they can then use in order to basically realize their products and their business in a way. So my intervention is to say that there is a very strong relationship between government strategic approaches to what they want to achieve in the longer term, with a light touch approach to regulations and of course making allowing also competition to prosper within nationally. Otherwise it won't work. You won't get the return on investment quickly, and also to pay up for any of the investment that has been made nationally. Thank you so much, and I'll wait for additional questions later.
Thank you, Mr. Azzarelli. Now, may I request Mr. Apparao Mallavarapu, CMD of Centum Electronics. In fact, Centum has been working very closely with the Indian space program for the last 3 decades or so. I would like to make his remarks, please. Dr. Apparao.
I think I unmute myself.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Hegde. Mr. Chairman, firstly, I want to start by congratulating you for being elevated to the top position as the chairman of NSIL. Dr. Hegde, my fellow panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here this evening and share a few thoughts on capacity building and industrial collaborations within the country. In the context of the topic today, I'll take a minute to introduce Centum. Centum was established 27 years ago and evolved and grew over time. Today, we are one of the largest electronic systems design and manufacturing companies in India, and over 75% of our revenues come from outside of India. Our main markets are defense, aerospace, space, industrial, and medical. Centum provides highly complex and customized solutions for the space programs, such as the digital receiver, radar fingerprinting, LN controller, and so on. So that's our product profile for the space industry. We have been in the space business for over 20 years and started in a small way with ISRO. Initially, the association started in a build-to-print mode, where ISRO used to consign all the materials and we used to manufacture, with ISRO engineers even coming to inspect the product being manufactured between two stages of manufacturing. And today, we design, develop, and build complete payloads, including testing and reliability of the products. To me, we are a classic example of capacity and capability building with collaboration and help from ISRO. We are not the only example in India. There are many other companies like ours. And to just name a few, Anand Technologies is one, Astra Microwave, Data Patterns. There are many of these companies that have actually built capacities and capabilities over a period of time, thanks to ISRO. The point I'm trying to make is we have gone through the journey of capacity and capability building with the help of ISRO, and I want to thank ISRO on behalf of all my fellow industries for all the support and encouragement they've given us over the last decades. You know, there are many examples of capacity building in India, not just space. Go back the last 20 years, starting with IT and software companies, automotive industry, pharma. We are also called the vaccine capital of the world. And more recently, we are seeing a huge capacity being built for cell phones. So I don't see capacity or capability building is a difficult task per se. I know it's not easy, but that's not the main point. But I think there are two main ingredients that are required. A very progressive and encouraging government policy, and a very good understanding of the market drivers or technology drivers or demand pull and customers. The government has started by announcing a new policy, and this I'm sure will also evolve to give the right impetus to the industry. Up until now, our space market was ISRO, and ISRO. ISRO had a 5-year plan. They knew what they needed in terms of satellites and launch vehicles, and it was published data, and we knew where the market was heading. So we could plan in terms of resources required, be it human resources or hard assets. Space business is asset heavy when it comes to upstream, be it equipment manufacturing or building satellites or launch vehicles. So before one embarks on capacity building, I think it is very essential to know the market demand. When the new space policy that has been announced, there is a lot of hope and expectations that the space economy will open and space business is all set to grow. While I'm certain this will happen, I believe we must have a firm understanding of what the market will need, who will be the end customer, who will invest in the space assets, and who will pay for the services. The shift in technology, such as constellations of small satellites addressing many applications while driving lower costs, is another variable that is evolving. There is no clarity on these issues yet, and I'm sure with time clarity will come. And once there is clarity on the above points, building capability and capacity will be swift. I'm sure companies will come together to collaborate within India and from outside also. We have already started working with many startups in converting their innovative ideas into space-qualified products. Also, a good example of technology transfer and industrial collaboration is the multiple consortia that have been put together by various Indian companies for manufacturing of PSLV. The point I'm making is understanding the market clearly is the first step required for the capacity building and industrial collaboration within and out of the country. Finally, as an entrepreneur, I'm an incorrigible optimist, and I have no doubt with the support of ISRO and coming together of the established space players working alongside with the innovative startup ecosystem and new players who want to be a part of the space economy, we'll be able to build the capability and capacity to address the space market, like the many examples I mentioned earlier. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Apparao, for very crisp, insightful points on the situation here and what a typical Indian industry would look for in the coming days. Now I request Mr. Gurvinder Chohan, a friend for a couple of decades and who has been closely interacting with the Indian space centers, I mean, the government centers of ISRO, from his earlier position in MDA, and now he is the founder and CEO of AQST in Canada. Congratulations, Gurvinder. I saw your most recent announcement to send humans to moon also in the next 4 or 5 years. So now let me invite Mr. Gurvinder Chohan to make his remarks.
First of all, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And thank you very much for your kind word, Dr. Hegde. And yes, it's true. Our cooperation and collaboration goes at least a decade back with ISRO. And that reminds me my journey and the discussion we started to have the very first programs when we started to discuss with the assembly, integration and testing, giving to the industry and private partner. And the roadmap I prepared at that time to SSE and to ISAC at that time. So coming back to the point now, I think I will give a little bit of AQST, what we are. AQST, we started it in 2014 actually, and in 2019 we started in Quebec in Canada. And then I took over the whole group in 2019 and 2020, and now I am the complete owner of this group. And we are, I think, the perfect example of collaboration and growth of EcoCenter. Because what we did, we established a lot of collaborative approaches with the different within countries. Like we have a collaboration in Ukraine, we have a collaboration in Germany, we have a collaboration in Australia, Indonesia, and we have offices. So that helped us to grow and added into our ecosystem. So that's where we stand today. And as you can see, with that approach, we are targeting to have our mission to moon in 2028, where we are, I think, will be the second company, private company, to have that mission after Israel, where we will be sending our own lander and rover to lunar surface. And this rover has already been qualified by ESA and for ExoMars program. And now coming back to the other part of what we do is that this morning we had a very interactive discussion about spectrum and user management and difficulty what we are facing. And I think that is the way of the collaboration where we need industry collaboration. To how do we collaborate? We at AQST have a different approach where we try to develop and come up with their innovative ideas, where we can have a less and less dependency on bureaucratic approach strongholds. For example, we are developing an optical satellite that's purely optical communication based satellites and going away from the RF spectrum. What does it mean? That does mean that we will be able to have multiple launch, multiple satellites without any interference and without any issues of doing coordination with different stakeholders. And then And it also saves a lot of geopolitical issues sometime when we have for the orbital slots. Now, when I look at the industrial collaboration, I look into a different optics. My optics is there are two layers of collaborations. First is the governmental collaborations, for example, ISRO collaborations within India and outside India. And second layer of collaboration is the private industry and private partnerships. Like how do we partner and how do we collaborate? I'm glad to hear today that since last year I've been following up all the development taking place in India, is that a lot of progress has been made and new policies coming up, and a lot of liberalization has been done with respect to the space policy and open space in India. That is a precursor to kickstart the progress of Indian space programs and Indian space industry. Because without the involvement of government's liberalized policy, the industry cannot really participate and cannot do much, as we have seen in the previous years. Although we tried, or I tried many times to do many projects within the Indian industry, but there were constraints according to legal and collaborative frameworks. We tried to do some MOUs with Canadian space agencies and with other partners, and but there were constraints. I hope this constraint will go away within the framework what we are going to draft. Again, coming back to the main point is that we have to have a two set of collaborative approach. One for the ISRO as a whole toward the global collaboration, and secondly with the industry. Like how does the industry cooperate and open its doors and have the open policies with respect to the receiving the technology. And today, which I see it, like I've been discussing, and there's some program we wanted to do in India. And in order to transfer the technology, or in order to bring some technology, or to transfer some of the parts and technology, I have to pay a heavy, let's say, duties or excise duties or custom duties, even to bring anything out to India. Even if I want to improve my product, like if I give some product to India to take it to the next level, I have to have a lot of investment to be done. I think in that respect also we have to look into the fiscality of the program, like how does the fiscality of this transfer of technology will help to grow the Indian industry. I'm glad to see that a lot of advancement is being done in with respect to the launch vehicles. And there is still constraints. We have been approached by many companies for example, the electric propulsion systems, which we have qualified for many years. But again, as soon as we start to transferring something or sending some pieces, the price and the cost for the Indian industry goes very high, and then they cannot become competitive in the industry, in the global market. So we have to look into all the parameters, not only one particular parameters. So that's why right now, for the short answer, it is that we have to look into two different parameters from the global perspective of governmental as well as commercial. Like how do we can have all these pieces put together to have a collaborative approach to develop ecosystem. And I will look forward to other questions follow on.
Thank you, Gurvinder. Now we will come to our fourth distinguished panelist, Mr. Patrice Kuras, to make his remarks. But keeping the time in mind, I would also like to pose one question to him, because he works in UK with the UK government. Because in 2010, early 2011, I had met Lord David Willets, who had just then taken over as the Minister for Space, when BNSC was upgraded to UK Space Agency. And subsequently, I had also met Dr. David Parker, the new CEO of UK Space Agency, and both had told me one thing, as against what we have been doing in India, UK Space Agency will only make congenial policies and encourage industries from Europe and elsewhere to come and invest, and the entire space activities, designing, manufacturing, providing service, everything we expect industries to do, UK Space Agency will not do any such thing. But we have a canvas of £5 billion. That is what was told to me by them in 2011. So when Mr. Patrice Kuras makes his remarks, I would also request him to emphasize how things work in UK. especially from making industry to do the space activities and government making only policies and providing the environment and encouragement. Mr. Patrice Kuras.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Hegde, for this question. First, I would like also to thank the SIA organization for this invitation today. I am very glad and honored to attend this panel and to represent Thales Alenia Space. Maybe a few words about Thales Alenia Space first. I think you well know Thales Group in India, focused on technology and involved in defense and security. I would say that Thales Alenia Space is the space arm of Thales Group. We are a workforce of 8,000 people today for an annual revenue of $2 billion, and we are one of the major satellite manufacturers. We are dealing with all space markets: telecommunication, observation, exploration, and navigation. And our customers are agencies, commercial private operators, and defense organizations. We address all aspects of space, from ground segments on Earth, and also space segments, including payloads, instruments, platforms, for small satellites like nano satellites, for example, and up to very big satellites, telecommunication satellites, high throughput satellites. And we are also involved in constellations and in space infrastructures. About cooperation, capacity building, and the role of private players, the topic we're interested in today. At Thales Alenia Space, I think that we are in the middle of this approach. We are spread across 18 sites all over Europe. So I would say that industrial cooperation and capacity building is part of our DNA for quite a long time. Due to the European Space Agency organization with 22 countries in Europe, plus Canada, and its return policy, we now have a partnership network across Europe, and we have an industrial footprint supported by ESA in France, in Italy, in Spain, in Belgium, in the UK, in Germany, in Poland and Switzerland. Before answering to your question, maybe I would like also to point out that especially for newcomers in this business, that space is a very demanding and very difficult, very competitive market, especially for newcomers. It is not a mass production business. It requires high quality and high reliability products due to our specific environments. It has specific standards as well, and it requires a very significant human investment. We are using most of the time very cutting-edge technology, and are always looking for new innovation. So it is a challenging but very exciting world. We did not have at Thales Alenia Space a lot of opportunities to work in India until now, for different reasons. But I hope that this new era in India will open opportunities for us to work together with the Indian industry. Regarding the UK, so I'm more located in France, but I know a bit how it works in the UK. And before the last changes in UK, they were deeply involved in the European Space Agency policy. And in Europe, we have two main promoters of the space industry, of the space commercial industry, which are governments, I would say, for defense purposes, MODs, especially France, Italy, Germany, UK. And in addition to governments, we have this European Space Agency, where France, Germany, and UK are the main contributors. And thanks to this organization, who is funding lots of scientific and exploration programs by using their geo-return process, any penny, any euro given to the space agency is supposed to come back to the European industry. This is the way it works. And this is how we developed for the past decades. This is how we developed our industries. I don't know how it is going to work in the coming years in the UK due to the Brexit. I assume, I didn't read a lot about that. I assume they will try to stay in the European Space Agency somehow. But today, ESA and the Space Agency was the engine, I would say, the engine of the development of the space industry in Europe. If that answers a bit to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Patrice. Now, though I was thinking I will not ask any question, I would like to ask one question both to Tony and Patrice. See, with respect to the aerospace or space industry in Europe especially, we find that the respective European governments have some small stakes. So that works good for both industry and the government. So that government, in a way, commits to help industry, and industry always listens to the stakeholder, even though minority stakeholder. So keeping this in mind, if all the four panelists want to make a short remark of how could government really help industry in a committed way, and I think you please go ahead. After that, I hand over to Rajiv for summarizing and making closing remarks. So, Mr. Tony Azzarelli.
Yes, thank you. So the idea in Europe, on a national basis, of course, you have your national projects, and for which you, as a country, have a program, and basically you invest in that program to as a partner to the industry, as a partner to education and universities, for example, and as such, the government tries to help, let's say, a nascent or growing industry in a way for which requires help. I have to say, space is actually not easy to access as an industry and also as a product, in effect. But however, I have to say that I am seeing more and more countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Slovenia, for example, where these small companies, as the Access Space Alliance represent the small space in a way, we have seen these new countries, for example, to start investing and promoting companies to actually invest in their countries. And how they do that? They do that through lowering barrier to entry, lowering requirements for incorporating a company in their country, and also lower taxation, providing also a vacation, as they call it, for income taxes for employees, for example, that may come in the country. So that they do import brains, and they do import technologies through promotion and investment through the country itself, basically. The UK, as I also am in the UK, and maybe answering the question from before, in the UK itself, UK has the hands both at the European Space Agency, which is not affected by Brexit at all, because European Space Agency is not the European Union. And of course, the UK, thanks to Willits from back 10 years ago when he became Minister of Science and Universities, and thanks also to the new UK Space Agency, which was formed then, the UK has invested a few billions already into the space agency, European Space Agency, to promote its own industry. As Patrick said, the investment into the European Space Agency comes back to the UK itself. And that's the way the European Space Agency works in a way. And also it has a foot nationally, so it has created Innovate UK and also Catapult, Space Application Catapult, in order to promote inward investment. So from foreign companies which are usually headquartered somewhere else, they can actually invest and promote UK industry in a way through SA, Space Application Catapult. Innovate UK, what it does instead, it promotes national companies like Skyrora, for example. Skyrora is developing a new rocket engine, like Clyde Space, which is actually building CubeSats technology basically in the UK, in Scotland, up in Scotland. D-Orbit, for example, building new ways to launch these CubeSats, for example. So all of these small companies, which are quite important, the SME is extremely important for growing the industry, the space industry, are helped by the government, of course, because it's like the airline industry back 100 years ago when it started off. Space is the same. You need to invest into technology, university education in order to then grow. And to do that, just my last thought, to do that, I had to Gurvinder's, Mr. Apparao's thoughts. It's not just the market you need to know. You need to have a strategy. You need to develop a strategy with your own industry. Industry has to collaborate with the government to develop that strategy. It should be a bottom-up approach and not a top-down approach. That is the success that have been happening in the UK for the last 10 years. With the objective to actually take over 10% of the global market, basically in space. I will leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tony. Actually, there was a question, what does the term strategic approach to space mean? Strategy connects the means as well as ends. I think what Ms. Tony remarked at the end answers Mr. Sujit Samadar's question, who is one of the participants. If not, he can re-emphasize. And there is also a short question, very short question for Ms. Tony Azzarelli. How different is the capacity building technique for India and UK in space sector? I mean, this is from one of the participants. Do you like to make a very short remark? Do you find any big difference or any change in strategy that India needs to follow?
I think the Indian ecosystem has to embrace, maybe through the new changes it has embraced. It has to embrace an approach to collaborate more strongly with the industry itself, not just the national industry, but also the foreign industry that actually sees India as a potential market for themselves. You have to have a bottom-top approach to develop a strategy for India, and by strategy I mean a 20-year strategy. Where do you want to be in 20 years' time? Basically, that is strategy. The milestones in between are what takes you to that strategy, and I believe that lowering barrier to entry, as Mr. Gurvinder was saying earlier, when he has to import equipment to India or something into India, the barrier to entry or the taxation duty that he has to pay are very high. So maybe it's a sector issue, maybe it's not a sector issue, it's a global issue. You need to look at liberalization in order to actually to spearhead the country into the world, basically. And that helps both ways, nationally and internationally. So I think that it's quite important that India looks at some I don't know, some model approach. They could study the model of the European approach, for example, maybe something else if they wish to look at it, and see how that worked over the last 10 years, 20 years, and maybe they can actually adopt particular approaches that can help the country to grow and grow faster than maybe.
Yeah, I think keeping the time in mind, it's 6:12. Since we have an extremely distinguished panel, I am still tempted to request each one of them to make one small point, emphasizing or re-emphasizing what they wish to give as a message to development of space ecosystem, private space ecosystem becoming a thick part of the national space sector activities. I mean, one short comment from each one of you. After that, I would request Rajiv to take further and make his remarks. So we can start with Ms. Tony Azzarelli, one very short point, re-emphasizing what you want to say. Was I audible?
Yes.
I think he's frozen.
Okay. So shall I request Dr. Apparao to make one final short comment?
Sure. What I would say is, like I mentioned earlier, I think the important thing in the space, at least the upstream, is there's huge investments both in hard assets and in human resources. And when you do that, what you expect is visibility of business and continuity of business. But unfortunately, I think for whatever reason, we have this L1 type of tender process. And many a times, you're very concerned to make those investments because we develop a very complex product. It takes a lot of very high quality human resources and hard assets that we invest, knowing whether we will get that business back the next time around or not. Because they'll say L1 and whether the other person, I mean, competition is good, please don't get me wrong. But it should be of equal level and they should be able to deliver. So I think that is a big, how do you say, and then you can't move these assets or you can't use that infrastructure for something else because space is quite specific and it's very special. So I think if there's one thing that I would ask is some mechanism by which we do have competition, but at the same time, there is visibility of the business. I think that to me is what a typical business would want. That's our want, if you ask me. So.
Great.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Gurvinder Chohan.
I think I will go back to your question, what you had already asked, and I think that will summarize me or my thought very well. I think to develop, first of all, I've been very lucky to be part of a few of the development of space agencies across the globe. For example, I was part of Polsa, Polish Space Agency, and I saw the development of Turkish Space Agency from their infancy to stage to where they are today. And I also worked with some of the other space agencies, like a Korean Space Agency, KPLO, they came to visit us, Kari. And there is one thing I would suggest is that we should not reinvent the wheel. Like instead of writing the policy on ad hoc basis, we should study what has been done by other countries. For example, ESA or CSA or NASA, what this policy is. How do they contribute to the development of their space and ecosystem? Rather than just writing something ad hoc basis, oh, this is what we need to do, and let's write on that. As I said, I was a part of a Japanese parliamentary committee, what they call NSP, National Space Policy, a few years back. And it's not long. I'm talking about only 5-6 years ago. And you can see they already have a successful space program going on for many, many, many years. and they have a very successful industry base. But even then, they decided to go around the globe to visit each and every country to get the best of every country's policy. How did they implement it? What they are doing to develop the policy, and how they are developing their ecosystem. I think that is the way, is a more progressive way to do something, to learn from others and to implement it, rather than we write something and then after a 5 year, 6 year industry say, hey, this is not applicable to us. This is old already. We have move on. So I think this is what my take would be. Let's learn lesson from other countries and implement based on that solution rather than just scrapping something.
Thank you, Mr. Gurvinder. So, Mr. Patrice, Kuras, do you have any very short comment?
Yes, sure. Well, I would say that thanks to our large customer base, and we saw and contributed to many avenues to develop the local space industry everywhere. We dealt with all types of schemes and policies like offset, either direct, semi-direct, or indirect offsets, like it is the case in the Middle East, for example. It can be also capacity building, like in Australia with their AIC plan. It can be industrial participation, like in Spain or in Switzerland. We had also some case in Brazil with the Brazilian Space Agency for transfer technology contracts and what they call TAP, technology absorption plans. So we have a long list of different experiences. Each customer, each country has its own expectations and requirements depending on its industrial strategy and on its experience and maturity. But it's a question of strategy first, and then many solutions can be brought also by the industry. At Thales in a space, we propose trainings, either academic or on the job. We propose to receive customer representatives, customer teams, engineers, interns in our premises during the execution of the programs. We can make some co-design and co-development with local partners. We also, if needed, we can build specific infrastructures in the country, or we can use local infrastructures. For example, for the Iridium constellation, we worked together with Northrop Grumman in the US, in Arizona, and we used their own facilities. This is what we are going to do with Telesat in Canada. Obviously, we can keep the design authority but work with local suppliers, like it is the case in Korea today. So we can also provide consultancy when needed. So there's many possible schemes and avenues to follow with our customers, and we are ready for that also in India, because we have already quite a nice portfolio of solutions.
Thank you, Patrice. Now I will still go back to Ms. Tony Azzarelli for 1 minute comment if he has any, because I think some learning for us from his UK experience. Ms. Tony Azzarelli, please, for a very short comment.
Yes, apologies, my computer crashed as I was finishing. I think the panel actually reiterated some of the thoughts I made in not reinventing the wheel from Gurvinder, basically, and looking at what others have done to help the industry. One thing that I would suggest, and especially also to the UK, in a sense of from the UK experience, you're not alone. You have another 20-25 major spacefaring nations that are actually competing with you. So if you want to take over 10, 15, 20% of the global market, you're not trending alone. You have to make your market likable and competitive. So I think that's important to understand and be humbled that there is the rest of the world working not against you but competing with you in effect. So good luck with everything, and good luck to the new chairman of NSIL as well, and yourselves. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me thank all the distinguished panelists. I think now Mr. Radhakrishnan is the session chair, and he is now holding the most important position with respect to promoting the Indian industry ecosystem. So it's obviously our duty of the organizers to hear from the session chair, few critical remarks. Then I will leave the floor to Rajiv. Radhakrishnan, please. Radha?
You're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Hegde and all the panelists for such a wonderful and interesting session. And your thoughts, I could see a spectrum of thoughts coming from different companies and also the different countries. I think the capacity building, when we look at it, Dr. Hegde and other panelists also mentioned, it's being talked about, and Dr. Apparao also, it has been talked about for quite a long time. But what I feel today, the need of the hour when you're talking about the capacity building and enabling the Indian companies or the startups to see that how the space ecosystem grows in India. So what is the kind of hand-holding that these companies would require in case we need to have a very healthy ecosystem within the country? I think the thought process has to be converted into the actual deliverables now. I'm sure some of in a very small way, we have been mandated to enable the industries to take up a very big task of building rockets and maybe possibly satellites in the coming years. I think once the Indian launch vehicles gets rolled out to the industries, obviously the Indian industries, be it a company or a startup, would like to have some collaboration with some of the international partners in terms of the technologies that would be required to do that particular activity, which eventually is going to enrich and take some shape in the years to come. And I think this particular session and also the theme of the session, which you're talking about capacity building, really fructifies into reality in maybe very shortly. I'll not say in 5 to 10 years. In a couple of years, in 2 to 3 years, we should see a kind of a totally different dimension of the capacity building and the ecosystem being built in India. And I think we should be in a position to talk with more authority after 2 years to say, yes, I think this is what has been done in India in terms of the space system that are getting evolved. I think I also take forward the point which Mr. Gurvinder mentioned in terms of the taxation liberalization that can happen. I think that is one of the, I would say one of the easiest routes which will make provision for ingress and maybe outgrade of the technologies, not only within and outside. And in this one of the area, we should also look at it. And our colleague from Thales also has mentioned multiple dimensions of possibilities that could exist when you want to build a capacity building, because every country follows its own model of doing the things. The one is the technology spin-offs, and then you say offsets and the liberalization of the taxes. I think these are some of the points. Surely we will take it forward and come back with more vigor after 2 years to say, yes, India also we have developed this kind of capacity building, and we are going to cater to not only national but also the international needs. Thank you very much. Leave it to Dr.
Thank you, Mr. Radhakrishnan, for those extremely encouraging, positive, and firm remarks at the end of the session. So as moderator, it was a great opportunity for me. I thank the organizers, session chair, my good friend Radhakrishnan, and our most distinguished panelists. So with this, Rajiv, now it's floor is to you. I think we took a few minutes more, but it was more than worth it. Thank you again. Rajiv, please.
Okay. Yeah, so let me begin by thanking you, Vami, for the excellent stewardship that you've displayed and handled the event for the day. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor to have all of you today from all over the world. We have you from New Zealand to the Americas. We've been honored by the presence and the special address from eminent speakers who have made foundational contributions to the nation's space program and policy-making functions, and that enables India to stand tall among its peers. However, this is not the time to get complacent. We need to have a strategic vision, be able to visualize what's going to happen in the next decade and maybe more, anticipate changes, and build capabilities, explore newer markets, and create new business models. Thank you, Dr. S. Kiran Kumar, Mr. R. Uma Maheshwaran, Ms. Deepa Tyagi, Dr. D. Radhakrishnan, Mr. Ratnakara, Dr. Hegde, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. Thank you so much. I'm confident we can find a way forward in the coming months to ensure participation and collaboration between the industry and government, the local and industry, international industry players, and between the industry, academia, and regulatory and standards body. I'm sure that is going to catalyze the space economy and its contribution. There have been many interesting and useful discussions today, and a lot of good experiences have been shared, good lessons learned. One of the takes that I take with me out of this is that reform is not a destination but a journey, and we are on the path. We have learned a lot from the keynote sessions delivered by the brilliant speakers. Thank you, Mr. Tom Choi, Mr. Deepak Mathur, Mr. Bashir, and a special thank you, Dr. Subbarao, President of SIA-INDIA. I would also like to thank all the distinguished panelists who have joined this conference from across the globe and brought in interesting perspectives to each of the discussions. Finally, on behalf of the SATCOM Industry Association, I would like to express my appreciation for all the participants for taking time out of their busy schedules to be part of this event. At one point of time, I am told the number of participants was more than 300 plus to 350, somewhere very close to that, concurrently. So what we discussed today will be continued tomorrow, and I can assure you it's going to be a very productive and enriching experience on the day 2 of the conference. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow to listen to perspectives on the space economy, startups, industrial collaboration, satellite manufacturing, innovative use cases, and how a regulatory framework enables the industry, not just to service the Indian market, but also the international markets. With this, we have arrived at the end of the day 1 of the conference. Thank you all for your time and participation. See you all tomorrow. Thank you.